Brecht's epic theatre act as an example for Benjamin's theory of revolutionary art. As we understood that it transforms the mode of artistic production rather than merely transforming the content, it actually transforms the whole artistic production, the whole mode of artistic production. And Terry Eagleton here identifies three interrelated aspects: how it gives a new meaning to the idea of form, and how it redefines the author, and lastly, how it redefines the artistic product itself. So we look at all these aspects in detail. First of all, how it gives new meaning to the idea of form. As you know, artistic form crystallizes this mode of ideological perception. Ideology is something which is inherent in the form, and it also embodies a certain set of productive relations between artist and audiences. And the artistic mode of production a society uses talks a lot about the social relations between producers and consumers in that society. And it also gives an idea about the very literary form of the work itself. The questions like, can it print text by thousand, or are manuscripts passed by hand, or questions like whether it is sold in the market for the consumption of anonymous masses. So all these different modes of production, the work which is sold onto the market to anonymous thousand, it will be completely different from a work which is meant for a private audience, meant for something like a private audience. Their formal conventions will differ. The point is that this relations of artistic production, the relations between artist and audience, is something which is internal to art itself, and it will be shaping the art from within, shaping its form from within. And if changes in artistic technology can alter the relation between artist and audience, it can also equally transform the relations between artist and artist as well. The new media or transformed traditional ones actually open up fresh possibilities of collaborations which happen between artists. We earlier talked about this collaboration happening between artist and audience. So this is another level where there is this collaboration happening between artists. There is this particular director, Irving Pescator. He was this experimental theatre director from whom Brecht learned a great deal. He had this whole staff of dramatists to work on a certain play. And he even had a team of historians, economists, statisticians to check their work. So the point is that the relations of artistic production is something which is inherent in the art itself. It shapes the art from within. And then there is this concept of author, how these experimental theatres redefine the concept of author. For Brecht and Benjamin, the author is primarily a producer, something similar to any other maker of a social product. And here they completely oppose this romantic idea of the author as a creator, something like a god-like figure who is there mysteriously creating a masterpiece out of nothing. When you consider him as a creator or as a god-like figure, it is completely impossible to take him as a person or a worker rooted in a particular history with particular materials at his disposal. This is what Marx and Engels says, that to divorce the literary work from the writer as something like living historical human subject is to enthuse over miracle working power of the pen. Once you once you take him away from his historical situation, it is bound to appear that the work he produces is something like miraculous one. It is something like an unmotivated one. And Pierre Macheray, in this account, he says that he is completely hostile to this idea of the author as creator. For him, the author is essentially a producer who works up certain materials into a new product. And this author does not make the material with which he works. All these forms, values, myths, symbols, ideologies come to him already worked upon. It is already there. He takes these raw materials and he makes this product. And Macheray uses this concept of practice. He takes this idea of or the concept of practice from Althusser. By practice, in general, I shall mean any process of transformation of a determinate given raw material into a determinate product. A transformation effected by a determinate human labor using determinate means of production. So, this applies to the practice we know as art as well. Here we see an artistic mode of production. In artistic production, the artist uses certain means of production. That is, all those materials like forms, values, myths, symbols, ideologies. And he uses the specialized techniques of his art to transform the materials of language and experience, and he makes it into a determinate product. And there is no reason why this particular transformation should be more miraculous, why he doesn't understand why should we treat the author as a creator when he is only transforming determinate given raw materials into another product. He can't find anything miraculous about that. So that is the second part, redefinition of the author. Now we come to the next part, how it redefined the artistic product itself. Here we have two sides. Here we see Brecht criticizing bourgeois theatre for masking all those contradictions and creating something like wholeness or false harmony. And there is this long debate between George Lukács and Brecht happening over the question of realism and expressionism. This is what George Lukács think about this idea of realism, while Brecht had a completely different idea. Lukács regards the literary work as a spontaneous whole, where there is this reconciliation happening between all those contradictions, between essence, between appearance, between concrete and abstract, between individual and social whole. So, according to Lukács, literary work should reconcile these capitalist contradictions. It should smoothen all those contradictions, and it should not expose all those contradictions. That is what Lukács believed. And in overcoming these alienations, art should create, as I said earlier, art should recreate wholeness and harmony, and this work should be complete in itself. While Brecht gives a completely different idea, he says that this wholeness is something like a reactionary nostalgia, something which opposes social progress, something like a conservative idea. For him, art should expose rather than remove those contradictions. Thus, it should stimulate men to abolish them in real life. The work, according to him, should not be complete in itself. And it will be complete like any other social product. Artistic product should be completed only in the act of being used, or in the act of consumption by the audience. It becomes complete. That is what Marx says in Contribution to the Critique of Political Economy, that a product only becomes complete when a product is consumed. Production not only creates an object for the subject, but also a subject for the object. And then there is this ongoing debate between Lukács and Brecht over this concept of realism and modernism. There is this conflict, which is a deep-seated divergence between Brecht and Lukács on this whole question of realism. And in this debate, Lukács takes a political orthodoxy stand, while Brecht is something like, he takes the stand of a revolutionary leftist. And Brecht responds to Lukács' criticism, saying that his art is decadently formalistic. Brecht accuses Lukács of producing a purely formalistic definition of realism. He says that Lukács is making a fetish of one historically relative literary form. So this 19th century realist fiction was something like a feature of that century. And Brecht says that Lukács is making a fetish out of this historically relative literary form, demands that all other art form should conform to this paradigm. When Lukács demands for such a paradigm, he is actually ignoring, according to Brecht, he is actually ignoring the historical basis of form. And Brecht criticizes that Lukács' realism is formalist because it is academic, but at the same time it is unhistorical, drawn from the literary realm alone, rather than it doesn't respond to the changing conditions in which literature is produced. And Brecht sees Lukács as something like a contemplative academic critic rather than a practicing artist. He is not a practicing artist, he is just a contemplative academic critic. And here, Lukács is actually suspicious of all those modernist techniques, labeling them as decadent because, according to him, they fail to conform to the canons of Greeks or 19th century fiction. According to him, the Greek literature or even 19th century fiction act as canons, and he treats other modernist techniques as decadent. And here we see Brecht's support of modernism and expressionism. He calls Lukács a kind of an utopian idealist who wants to return to those good old days, whereas Brecht, along with Benjamin, believed that one must actually start from all those bad new days and we should actually make something of them. All those avant-garde forms like expressionism hold much importance for Brecht because for him they embody skills newly acquired by contemporary men. They represent all those skills acquired by contemporary men. It is an art form for the contemporary period. It has this capacity for the simultaneous registration and to a kind of a swift combination of experiences. So here he says even socialism forms a different kind of individual and it will certainly demand a different form of art to realize it. We can't be just like Lukács, an idealist, a utopian idealist who often who immerse himself in those good old days. Here, we should also understand that Brecht is not actually completely rejecting realism. He is not abandoning the concept of realism. It is just that he wants to extend its scope. The concept of realism must be wide and political, sovereign over old conventions, and we must not derive realism as such from particular existing works, but we shall use every means, old and new, tried and untried, derived from art and derived from elsewhere, to render reality to men in a form they can master. So, this is what Brecht believes. So, for Brecht, realism is less a specific literary style or genre or a mere question of form. For him, it is a kind of art which discovers social laws and developments and which unmask all those prevailing ideologies by adopting the standpoint of the class, which offer a kind of a broader solution to social problems. Here ends the second part of the lecture on author as producer. Hope it is clear. Thank you. Have a nice day.